Let's say you're getting close to finishing your residency and you're going to start receiving offers for employment. Employers are going to differ vastly in terms of their sophistication. So does it have a strategic plan? That would apply whether or not your future employer, or prospective employer I should say, is going to be a physician practice or whether it's going to be a hospital. Now in terms of hospitals, hospitals can vary greatly. You know, at the hospital, what kind of voice do physicians have? Is it a hospital whose leadership listens to physicians, works collaboratively with physicians, or is it more of a top-down management style where administration dictates more of the practice parameters and how resources are utilized more unilaterally? All right, so that's a culture issue, but it's an important question to ask because that may influence your ultimate satisfaction practicing at that location. Now, another thing I want to bring up to you is a key physician getting ready to retire. Now, this may apply more to a smaller practice situation, but that can also have an impact on the practice environment. Again, leadership might change. So that would be a good question to ask, let's say if you're being interviewed by a medical practice, say how long has the leadership been in place, how long is the leadership going to stay in place, because it's so interesting that your practice environment, and this is true of any employment relationship, how quickly it can change just by someone new in leadership, maybe you don't have a relationship with before. Things like that can really change the culture of an employer. One of the other things you want to think about is employee turnover. It's a good sign if the physicians who are working there and other employees tend to stay there. That speaks well of the culture. But one thing I think it's important, to the extent you can, talk to potential colleagues that work there at the institution. They'll give you a sense of what it's like to work there. How long have you been working there? How are the physicians treated there? Do you have the possibility of getting flexible hours? Do you have the opportunity to attend CME courses you'd like to attend? So forth, things like that. If they give you a good vibe, then that would be positive. So they're probably some of the best sources of information. You know, do your research on the employer. Find out what kind of press it's gotten. Get a sense if you can, find out how it's thought of as in the community. Get an idea of who the competition is. So this will all inform you about maybe how you can get more of a context about your potential employer and just give you kind of a gestalt about how to think about this employer and its position in the community. So find out, ask the group, what hospitals are you affiliated with? This can be important because some hospitals may have a better reputation for quality than others, and so you would want to be assured that the hospital that you might be required to practice in is in fact a quality institution. Another important factor is, and this is kind of a general consideration, is obviously you are going to be paid for your clinical time, seeing patients and your procedures and so forth. However, you may have other expectations on you that may not be clinically related, but that may take time and be duties that you will need to satisfy on top of providing direct patient care or clinical care. For example, will there be any expectations for you to engage in business development? But a movement now is being put in place to replace that pure fee-for-service or item-by-item reimbursement with something called generally value-based payment. And this means that physician payment will be based sometimes in part on fee-for-service, but also on how efficient the physician is, let's say in utilizing healthcare resources, and how well the physician's quality scores are, based on outcomes, based on processes, based on patient satisfaction as well. That's going to be a big change, all right? And so the employer may now have practice or quality parameters that it will require you to follow. Or if it doesn't now, it probably will, okay, because being able to satisfy quality criteria will be part of the overall compensation scheme that's being implemented. So the question you will want to ask is, what are any of the quality parameters that you will be required to conform to when you start practicing at that employer? That's very important. It's a great question to ask too, because it will show the employer that you're thinking about these issues, okay? And the employer will want someone like you who's thinking along these lines, because it shows initiative, it shows a certain amount of sophistication, that you know what's going on, and that you will have a sense of being able to understand what its concerns are going to be as well. Because it wants, your employer, no matter who it is, will want you to be in tune with its goals as it attempts to transition to this big change in physician reimbursement. One of the things that is necessary for this transition to work is information technology, to capture as much information about a patient's compliance, your adherence to utilization measures, quality measures, patient outcomes, all of that, okay, is essential, all right? So what you need to know is, how is the potential employer doing in terms of technology, okay? If it isn't sophisticated technologically, well, does it have plans to improve, to capture the kinds of information that are going to be absolutely essential, so you and your colleagues in the employer can understand how you're doing with respect to goals that are required of you. If you're going to be working at a hospital, then tour the facility, all right? Take some time, if you can, to talk to office staff, to talk to hospital staff, all right? One of the things that will influence your compensation and will also influence your ability to build a practice is, to what extent is there really a need for you in your particular specialty in that part of the country. There's something called the AMA Workforce Mapper, and you can get in this module and it will tell you for any particular county in the United States what the patient ratio is for each physician in your specialty to patients in that county. And it has a ton of other information in there. So my suggestion is, if you're really interested in an employer, do that research. You could conceivably go in to a potential employer with more knowledge of their market than the person who's across the table from you. And that would be extremely impressive. You know, is the employer going to market your services? All right. Now, you may get the answer to the question, well, of course we will. But then ask another question. Do you have money allocated in your budget to market on behalf of me and to help me build my practice? It's a good question, shows some sophistication on your part. Will the employer really support and invest in your clinical practice? So just make sure that there's going to be staffing there to help, that will be able to submit bills timely for you, keep your schedule, those kinds of things.